So, welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series called Daily News in Shorts. In this lecture series, we cover a particular day's current affairs in a very short span of time within 30 minutes. The idea is very simple. We want you to cover your current affairs on a daily basis, but we don't want you to spend your entire day just reading the newspaper. Therefore, for your facility, we will cover the entire day's current affairs within 30 minutes so that you're left with your rest of your day to cover other parts of your UPSC syllabus. Now, just watching this lecture in 30 minutes would be job half done, because just after watching it, you need to revise it as well. Why? Well, revision helps in consolidating these current affairs in your memory so that you do not forget them. Now, you can revise these current affairs from the notes provided by us, and like I say this every time in the beginning of the lecture, these notes are available on our Telegram platform. The link to our Telegram channel is provided in the comment section just below this video. Alright, let's begin today's discussion, but first, let's take a look at the list of topics that we shall cover today. So, in total, we'll be covering these 4 topics. Topic number 1 in this list is, well, rise in CSR spending, corporate social responsibility spending. Recently, a report came out which portrays that CSR spending by private companies in India has risen. Now, what is CSR spending? Is it legally mandatory for these companies to allocate some funds for CSR? What legal mandate is there? We'll talk about this CSR concept in its totality. Then, in June this year, 3rd UN Ocean Conference is going to be conducted in France. Nice, France. Okay, Nice is a place or a city in France. So we'll talk about this 3rd UN Ocean Conference and what it talks about, basically what issues are going to be debated upon in this conference. Then we'll talk about the history and evolution of monsoon forecasting in India. It started during the British times, but it has evolved into its own after independence as well. So we'll talk about this. And in the end, we'll talk about a case in the Supreme Court, which says that how should we treat unopposed election victories? If there is no candidate contesting on a seat, okay, there is just one candidate, then should we declare him victorious, unopposed, or should we make it mandatory for him to get some minimum amount of votes? Okay, so this is some issue. This is an issue that is being talked about in the Supreme Court. So we'll talk about this unopposed election victories. Okay. All right. So these are the 4 topics that we'll discuss. Let's start discussing them one by one, starting with topic number 1, which is rise in CSR spending. So, aided by a surge in profits, funds spent by listed companies on corporate social responsibility rose by 16%. Okay. And well, the funds allocated towards corporate social responsibility, okay, well, they increased because these companies, well, became way more profitable. So these companies who contribute funds towards corporate social responsibility, well, their profits rose by 18%. Now, first of all, what is corporate social responsibility? So major private companies of India, well, they have to allocate 2% of their profits towards this corporate social responsibility fund. Okay. Now, money from this fund will be used for social projects, environmental projects, okay, help people in the neighborhood, right? This is done, or this is made legally mandatory so that these companies who are earning money also give something back to the society. That is why this CSR concept has been introduced. Now, what is the legal position in India with respect to CSR? Clear? Let's talk about this. Corporate social responsibility. So as per section 135 of the Companies Act 2013, okay, all eligible companies are required to allocate minimum 2% of their average net profit over the preceding 3 financial years towards CSR activities. Okay, so the average profit for the last 3 years, 2% of that shall be contributed towards corporate social responsibility activities. Now, this is mandatory for companies registered under Companies Act, right? Plus, section 135 says that not all companies are required to allocate funds for CSR. Only a certain category of companies are required to contribute funds towards CSR, okay? So, what is the eligibility criteria for companies to be eligible for this CSR category, okay? So, what are the financial thresholds? Companies with net worth of 500 crore or above, revenue of 1000 crore or above, or net profit of 5 crore or above. Only these companies are required by Section 135 of Companies Act to dedicate or allocate 2% of their average net profits towards CSR. Clear? So companies, basically the government wants that only big companies should be burdened with this. Small companies shouldn't be burdened with this. Okay. Now what are some other things which are mentioned in Section 135 which companies have to do when we talk about CSR? Okay. So first of all these companies who are eligible for CSR should form CSR committee. Okay. Eligible companies must form corporate social responsibility committees consisting of at least 3 directors and 1 independent director. This CSR committee is responsible for making CSR policies. Okay, that where this money will go for, which social projects they will target, right? Now, what type of activities come under corporate social responsibility? So CSR activities must be aligned with areas or subjects specified in Schedule 7 of Companies Act. So Schedule 7 of Companies Act actually mentions those activities like opening a school, afforestation, right? So Schedule 7 basically mentions those activities where this money would go. Okay, it includes activities like eradicating hunger, poverty, education, gender equality, environment, rural development. Now, if a company is basically allocating funds towards these activities, well, they have to also report what impact these funds have had on the people. So companies must include a detailed report on their CSR activities in their board's report. And if a company fails to allocate funds for CSR, well, a penalty is charged upon them. Okay. The penalty is twice the amount required to be transferred by the company. So let's suppose the requirement was 2%, but a company was only able to spend 1%. Okay. So the remaining 1% will be treated as penalty, twice of that. So this company will be given a penalty of 2%. Okay. So this is the penalty part. Clear? That's all the information that you need to know as far as CSR is concerned. And now let's quickly jump to topic number 2, which is Third United Nations Oceans Conference. So from June 9th to 13th, France will co-host the third UN Ocean Conference with Costa Rica. Okay, so basically Costa Rica and France are co-hosting this UN Ocean Conference. Okay, this conference shall be conducted in Nice, France. Around 100 heads of state and government, as well as tens of thousands of researchers, scientists, economic actors, activists, and citizens from around the world will converge in Nice during this time. Now, what is this UN Oceans Conference? Okay, now the first UN Ocean Conference was held in 2017. Okay, and it was held in New York City. Now, the purpose of UN Ocean Conferences, well, basically it is a high-level meeting focused on accelerating action and mobilizing all stakeholders to conserve and sustainably use the oceans. 70% of the earth is oceans, okay? Therefore, oceans form a very important part of our entire ecosystem of the planet, okay? Therefore, we need to conserve it, preserve it, use it sustainably. Okay, basically this conference's aim is to support implementation of Sustainable Development Goal number 14, SDG 14, which talks about, well, usage of ocean sustainably. Clear? Make sense? Now, the thing is, and this is a huge problem, okay, look, as far as oceans are concerned, some oceans lie within the territory of different countries. So part of oceans which are closer to the coastline of different countries, okay, they are categorized as territorial waters. So you can hold these specific countries responsible for whatever is happening in their territorial waters. But beyond a certain limit, most of our oceans lie in international waters, okay, which are not under the control of any country. International waters, okay. These international waters are also known as high seas. Now the thing is, 60% of our oceans are high seas. That means 60% of our oceans do not form part of or are not under any country's control. Now the problem or the challenge with this is, who will ensure that well, these oceans are protected. These high seas are protected. Since they are not the responsibility of any particular country, well, no one takes the responsibility of their preservation, right? Countries indiscriminately pollute these high seas, okay, destroy them, destroy biodiversity in them, but no one is responsible for their protection. Therefore, all the countries of the world had to come together to create a framework to protect high seas, right? So for that, well, we launched BBNJ agreement in 2023, okay? BBNJ agreement, biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction agreement. Now, this agreement was signed under UN Convention on Laws of the Seas. The aim of this convention is to conserve and sustainably use marine biodiversity in areas beyond national jurisdiction, which we call international waters or high seas. Okay. Now, this BBNJ agreement is open for signature, but it will come into force once 60 states or 60 countries ratify it. So 120 days after 60 states ratify it, this BBNJ agreement would come into force. Currently, 60 states have not ratified it. Now, as per UN clause, United Nations Convention on Laws of the Sea, you can see over here in this picture, okay, from your land, low tide line, okay, 12 nautical miles into the ocean belongs to this particular country who owns this land. This is territorial waters. From this area, 200 nautical miles, from low tide to 200 nautical miles is exclusive economic zone. Now, this exclusive economic zone doesn't basically, the meaning of exclusive economic zone is that no country owns this exclusive economic zone, but, well, the country whose coastline is closer to exclusive economic zone has the exclusive right of using economic resources found in this ocean. Okay. And beyond 200 nautical miles lie the high seas, international waters. And 60% of our oceans are from these high seas. Okay. There is no mechanism to protect these high seas, preserve these high seas, conserve these high seas. So BBNJ precisely tried to do that. Now, the main aim of UN Ocean Conference would be to further discuss how to implement BBNJ agreement, to supplement BBNJ agreement, and to basically accelerate the process of ratification of BBNJ agreement. Okay, so UN Ocean Conference would basically accelerate the process of BBNJ agreement coming into force. Okay, now you need to know a few facts about high seas. Okay, what are high seas? So they represent more than 60% of the ocean and are currently the only areas not governed by international law. Now, the problem with high seas is that lack of surveillance and lack of common rules, because they don't lie under the control of any one particular country. Well, this problem, because no one is taking responsibility for high seas, it has created a lot of issues in high seas. Okay, massive hydrocarbon, that means crude oil pollution, plastic pollution, illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing, capture of protected and endangered mammals. Now, to end this legal vacuum, since there is no law as to how to govern these high seas, we need BBNJ agreement to be ratified by 60 countries so that it may come into force, because this is the only agreement that basically creates a legal framework for regulating high seas. Okay, so ratification of BBNJ agreement is the need of the hour if we are serious about protecting 60% of our oceans. Clear? Okay. Now let's move forward to third news item, which is monsoon forecasting in India. So the 4-month southwest monsoon season brings almost 70% of the country's annual rainfall. Now this rainfall is critical for our agriculture, for our economy as a whole, and to recharge reservoirs and aquifers. Now, because monsoons are so critical for our agriculture and for our economy, their correct forecasting is of extreme importance. And this realization was not only done by the Indians, well, this realization was there with the British colonial government in India also. Okay, how so? So pre-independence, what was the history of monsoon forecasting in India, since it was that critical? So a systematic effort to forecast monsoon rainfall began in 1877. 2 years after IMD was established by the British meteorologist and paleontologist Henry Francis Blanford. Okay, he is Henry Francis Blanford. Okay, in 1904, Sir Gilbert Walker took over as IMD's head, and Sir Gilbert Walker created a proper model as to how to forecast for monsoons. Okay, Walker developed the first objective model based on statistical correlations between monsoon rainfall and global atmospheric land and ocean parameters. So he developed a correlation between basically global atmospheric pressure cycles and Indian monsoons. In fact, he was the first one to draw a connection between El Nino. That time it was not known as El Nino, it was known as Southern Oscillations. But he was the first one to draw a connection between El Nino and Indian monsoons. Okay. Now, in this picture, as you can see, the thing is that red line is forecast by IMD and blue line is the actual rainfall. So, as you can see in the previous years, well, IMD was way off the mark. Okay, IMD predicted something and the actual rainfall was something else. But as we are moving forward, IMD's forecasting models have improved. And as you can see, last year, IMD's forecast was pretty accurate, right? So we are basically improving our forecasting models. Now, it's important to know Walker model, okay? So Walker identified 28 parameters or predictors with significant stable historical relationship. Walker described 3 large-scale seesaw variations in global pressure patterns, okay? So southern oscillations, which we today know as El Nino, North Atlantic oscillations and North Pacific oscillations. Walker said that all these 3 things have an impact on monsoons in India. Plus, Walker was also of the opinion that you cannot forecast for the entire Indian subcontinent all at once. The entire Indian subcontinent is pretty big. So he divided the entire Indian subcontinent into 3 regions: Peninsular India, Northeast India, Northwest India. Okay. Now, his model was so authoritative, basically, that IMD decided to stick with this model until 1987. After 1987, IMD came out with its own models, many other models. Okay. Some were successful, some were unsuccessful. But the recent models that IMD has, they are pretty accurate, as you can see from this chart also. Okay. They are quite accurate. All right. Okay. Now let's move forward to fourth news item of the day, last news item of the day, which is unopposed election victories. So the Supreme Court suggested that in case there is only one candidate in an election, she should be required to obtain a prescribed minimum vote share in order to be declared elected. The thing is, currently, as per Indian law, if there is only one candidate contesting from a seat, no one is competing against him, then that person would be declared victorious without even the election process. Okay, that is the rule, that is the law. But recently, a public think tank, research think tank, Vidhi Centre for Legal Policy, they filed a petition in the Honorable Supreme Court and they said that this should not be the case. Okay, they basically challenged Section 53 Clause 2 of Representation of Peoples Act. Now, Section 53 Clause 2 of RPA says that if there is no competition, if only one candidate is standing from one seat, well, he should be declared victorious without the election process. Vidhi Centre is basically challenging it and saying that this provision of our law is unconstitutional. Clear? Makes sense? Okay. So currently, if you are the only one contesting the election, you are declared victorious as per Section 53 Clause 2. But Vidhi Centre says this is unconstitutional. So what is the argument made by Vidhi Centre? Okay. Vidhi Centre says that, look, whenever you go for elections, people go to cast their vote on the EVMs, right? And on these EVMs, well, you have the list of candidates and buttons which you press along with that. One such name in that list is none of the above, nota, right? So if you're not happy with any of the candidates, well, you can press the nota button to basically express your disenchantment with the candidates that you have in your constituency. Make sense? Now, Supreme Court has said in People's Union for Civil Liberties versus Union of India case in 2013 that the right to exercise nota option is a fundamental right under Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause A. Article 19, Clause 1, Subclause A is related to freedom of speech and expression. Okay. Now, Supreme Court had maintained that allowing voters to express nota is part of freedom of speech and expression and thus is a fundamental right. Make sense? Okay. Now, Vidhi Centre says that if there is only one candidate, okay, and if there is only one candidate, then he would be declared victorious without basically allowing the voters of that area to press the nota button. Okay, because there won't be any elections if there is only one voter. Because there won't be any elections, the voters of that area won't get the chance to press the nota button if they are not happy with that candidate. Make sense? But nota is a fundamental right. So don't you think Section 53 Clause 2 of Representation of People's Act is unconstitutional because it basically steals away the right to press nota, which was guaranteed under Article 19 Clause 1 Subclause A as per Supreme Court in 2013. That is the argument of Vidhi Centre. Okay. Now, Supreme Court is currently still hearing this case, though Supreme Court advised that if such a situation arises, then the Supreme Court has just advised, it has not passed its judgment. Okay, Supreme Court has just said that you still conduct the elections and make that candidate victorious only if he gets minimum amount of votes. Okay, maybe 10%, 15%. Clear? Only then he should be declared victorious, but elections should be conducted. Now that's just the advice given by Supreme Court. No judgment has been passed. And Supreme Court has invited the comments of Election Commission and the central government on this issue. But this is the issue. Clear? Now, as far as history of unopposed elections are concerned, well, so far from 1951 to 2024, 26 candidates have been elected unopposed. So in the past 75 years of our election history, well, 26 candidates have been elected. Okay? Unopposed. Elected unopposed or declared victorious unopposed without conducting elections. Vidhi Centre says that this has taken away the right of 82 lakh electors to basically express their desire. Okay? So more than 82 lakh electors had been deprived of the chance to cast their vote in these elections. Clear? Of these 26 no contests, 7 took place in 1957, 5 in 1951 and 67, 3 in 1962, 2 in 1977, each in 71, 80, 89, and the latest was from Surat, Gujarat, where a candidate won the election in 2024. BJP candidate. Okay? Now, the Vidhi Centre also admits that uncontested elections are more common in state assemblies than centre. That is why just 26 examples are there from 1951 onwards till 2024. But they are very common in state assemblies. Nonetheless, there should be a rule with respect to that also. Clear? And that would be all. With that, we conclude today's session. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. And I'm sure it has added value to your preparation. But like I say this at the end of every lecture, it would add more value if you revise this lecture as well. Revision is very important. And on that note, I'd be signing off with the promise of seeing you again with another set of news items. Thank you, everyone.